morning. You're watching Vantage Point right here on Newsfirst. As usual, we come to you every fortnight bringing you a different view on the political landscape, not only in Sri Lanka but also in other parts of the world. Now, elections have come to pass in Sri Lanka, the crucial provincial council elections in the western and southern province. However, there are reports that the country will be gearing on for a very trying time for the next year or so, with elections coming about and also some developments happening in the international arena which would have an impact on Sri Lanka. To talk about all of this, I have with me today Dr. Dayan, Jayatilleka, former diplomat and a political scientist. Thank you very much, Doctor, for joining us.
Thank you, Mahina.
Doctor, now there have been a lot of reports about an upcoming election. Now, we just saw the Western and Southern Provincial Council elections coming to a close. We spoke about it in our last program, about the new players who have come about, how the elections were rather different from the elections that we have seen in the past. And we also saw that in the elections prior to that, where we saw some new faces taking out office. However, the most pivotal or the most vital election, it is slated to be happening next year. There's a lot of media reports about it that have come out about the presidential election taking place next year, and more specifically in January. Do you believe in these reports? What are your stances on this?
Yeah, I find them credible. I find them credible, Mahina. I'll give you my reasons. In the first place, newspapers which are quite serious in their news reportage, both English language newspapers and Sinhalese language newspapers, had this story this last weekend, and they've had it this last weekend. Now, I think that when newspapers belonging to different groups, maybe even rival groups, break the same story, and these are newspapers which have some credibility, then either the story is leaked from fairly close to the top, or somebody's doing some good investigative reportage. The consensus seems to be that the president will declare an election after November. Now, there's a logic there, because November 19th is when he passes the 4-year mark of his term, of the second term. And according to the Javadan Constitution, a president cannot declare his intention to have a presidential election. He can't go in for re-election until he's finished, or she has finished, 4 years. Now, this is true of the first term. There was some ambiguity about the second term, but I think it's safe to say that it will not be possible for the president to have an election earlier this year, because he would need a constitutional amendment, and I really don't think he can get the 2/3 for that constitutional amendment. So the status quo is that he has to wait till the 4 years have lapsed, and that's November 19th. And he can declare his intention to have an election anytime after the 19th of November this year. Now you have a mandatory period for campaigning, which would take us into early next year. Therefore, I think it's quite credible that we should expect, as the newspapers say, an election around January next year, 2015. There's another reason, Mahina. There's a lot of talk of possible economic sanctions, and that's also fairly likely.
Is this possible economic sanctions stemming from what we just witnessed in Geneva?
Absolutely, absolutely. But that would take until March the earliest, because the High Commissioner, whoever he or she is, has to present a written report to the Council's 28th session, which is March 2015. And if it's a harsh report, then the sanctions acts may fall not in Geneva, because that's not what Geneva does, but in and through the parliaments of other Western countries. So why should President Rajapaksa risk going for an election in a context of economic hardship, or with the prospect of economic hardship, which his opponents can use to diminish his vote. No logical leader would do that. Therefore, he would seek to be re-elected before March 2015. Now, you work it from this way, it's November 19th, 4-year cutoff, X number of weeks prescribed by the elections commissioner. So you're really talking about the first quarter of next year. That's January, February, probably before March. So I think it's very, very likely that you will have elections in January, February, the latest. Parliamentary elections have also been written about in the newspapers last weekend. And there,
in a general context, the parliamentary elections follow a presidential election.
Yeah, because the president likes to have the parliament in place and working for him or her at a presidential election, because no president trusts the MPs once they've been re-elected to actually bother to work for the presidential election. So yes, it will be a presidential election first and the parliamentary election later. There again, it is not very likely that the president would want to go in for a parliamentary election after economic sanctions have been introduced or are imminent. So there again we are talking about a March deadline. The newspapers say that thanks to astrology, the elections would be in April before the Sinhala and Tamil New Year. So what we are really talking about, Mahina, is that in less than a year from now, we are going to have two very important elections, not only because under any circumstances these are important, the presidential and the parliamentary, but because Sri Lanka is in a very critical stage in its relationships with the neighborhood and the outside world, and the elections do count. So it's under a year. It's in fact only 8 months before the probable declaration of the intention to have presidential elections. I'm talking about November. And therefore all discussion among those who are students of politics, and of course among the politicians, should be about the presidential election, gearing up for it, picking your candidate, and so on. And I don't see that really happening.
Now, Doctor, you have actually, links with politicians in the sense that you are, you have discussions with them.
Well, they talk to me.
Exactly, they talk to you, they come to you for ideas, or you speak to them. What is the common sort of atmosphere in the political arena right now among the ruling party and the opposition as well? Because both parties talk to you. What sort of atmosphere is there regarding the presidential election?
Well, on the part of the government, what I see is that there's a lot of affection for the president in the ranks of the government. But there is a lot of frustration too among SLFP seniors about the way things are going. They support the president, they like the president. I don't think anyone is seriously thinking of any other candidacy. But there is a sense that things must not go on as they are doing now. The Sri Lanka Freedom Party feels crowded out. The seniors in the party feel crowded out, and they want some kind of change. Not necessarily a change in the presidency, but a change in the context. The sense I really get is that the SLFP and its traditional coalition partners, the left parties, they don't matter that much, but the SLFP matters, that they would like to see a change, a real race, and they would like to see prospects opening up for them. Right now they see a glass ceiling, not so much coming from the president, because they concede this popularity, but they think that there's a kind of a clan or power structure which is keeping them away, holding them down. So I think they're looking for a change, and the irony is that it seems to me that most of the SLFP parliamentarians would like to see a change in the opposition, because then that gives them options. If there is a viable opposition and a leader who can give the president a run for his money, the SLFP can get a better deal even within the party, even within the government. They can get a better deal from the president, and they can get closer to the president. Right now, there is a bit of a gap. So there's a feeling that there has to be change. Some of the SLFP seniors have perhaps been talking to their former leader, President Kumaratunga. Well, this is also in the papers.
Yeah, there has been a lot of reports about President Kumaratunga also speaking about the presidential election.
Right,
even some people or reports suggesting that she might actually contest.
I know. I've seen that, and I watched her on television the other day. So I don't think she's ruled it out. She hasn't ruled it in, but she hasn't ruled it out. Now, though there is mounting disaffection within the SLFP parliamentary group and in the cabinet, I am not convinced that if the choice is President Kumaratunga, that these ministers, even if they were to move across to her, would be able to take the rank and file SLFP voter away from President Rajapaksa back to President Kumaratunga. Now, President Kumaratunga, of course, is known. They're familiar with her. But it's also a whole new country. It's a different era after the victory in the war. President Kumaratunga, like former Prime Minister Wickremesinghe, these are pre-war personalities. President Rajapaksa was a wartime president, and he's also a post-war personality because he was successful. Now, I'm not sure that the SLFP voters would cross back together with their MPs to a personality like President Kumaratunga, who is a pre-war personality. Because Mahinda Rajapaksa, when you watch him, either directly or on television, he has not lost his mass appeal. Whereas President Kumaratunga has been away for a long time, and I don't think she's yet found her feet. She seems to be somewhat out of touch with the mass mood which has moved on. Society has changed, and I really don't think that she would be a formidable candidate against Mahinda Rajapaksa at a presidential election. I do think she has a role. I mean, if somebody asks me, look, how can Chandrika Bandaranaike Kumaratunga serve the country, I would say bring her into parliament immediately. Not the government, obviously the government would be too scared to do that. But if the opposition really cared about what they say they care about, a nationalist MP would step down and would bring Chandrika Kumaratunga back in parliament.
From the opposition?
From the opposition, make her even the leader of the opposition, and she'll give the government a run for their money. You might even find some crossovers if she's in parliament on the opposition side. So that is a role she can play. But as a presidential candidate, I'm not convinced. This is also to do with her own political career. Now, she won twice. But who did she run against? In 94, when she was elected, she ran against Mrs. Srimati Sanayaka, who at the time was not even a member of the UNP. She took a membership in order to contest, and that's because the party asked her to step in after her husband had been killed just days or weeks before. Chandrika beat her. It was hardly a fight. Though, Madam Srimati Sanayaka got 43% of the vote, which is almost twice that which Ranil Wickremesinghe succeeded in getting the UNP. Well, that was the first time President Kumaratunga won. The second time was against the incomparable Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe. Now, that's not too difficult to do. But having beaten Srimati Sanayak and Ranil Wickremesinghe, that really doesn't qualify you to go up against Mahinda Rajapaksa. Not because Mahinda Rajapaksa is a dictator or a brute, but because Mahinda Rajapaksa is popular, he's likable, he has all the moves. He makes all the moves. With the kids and so on. I was watching some footage on the news, private station. I can't remember which. Maybe it might have been yours. And what I always watch is, I don't watch the president, I watch the kids. And I don't watch the ones in the front row, I watch the ones behind. And they were shrieking. They were with delight. There was a big cheer. I don't know, he went somewhere, I think in Batigalo.